Hello friends, welcome to the complete Next.js tutorial. In this tutorial, you will learn everything you need to know about new Next.js, and by the end of the video, you will have created this full stack application. This is the homepage. We will create all these pages using new Next.js App Router. And after that, you will learn how to fetch and cache static data and how to fetch dynamic data on the server side. To do that, we will be using MongoDB and get all this information from a database. By the way, we will create this dark mode toggle button and you will see how easy to use Context API in Next.js. Finally, we will implement Next.js authentication and you will learn how to protect routes, how to create a new user, and how to log in with user credentials and social media accounts. After that, we will be able to see this protected dashboard that shows the user posts, and we will be able to add a new post. As you can see, it adds the new post without refreshing the page, and also you can delete your posts, and it revalidates this data immediately using Next.js SWR Mutation. It's a great project to understand all the basics of the new Next.js. Routing, server-side and client-side rendering, styling, data fetching, creating an API and implementing CRUD operations, SEO improvements, Next.auth user sessions, and more. And I will add all the timestamps in the video so you can easily find the topic you want to follow. And if you want to see more Next.js projects, please like the video and let me know which technologies you want to see in the next application. If you are ready, let's get started. Before starting, I want to give some short information to help you understand why we should use Next.js. As you know, Next.js is the most popular React framework that is used for building server-rendered web applications. In the previous video, I explained what's the feature of React and why React team recommends using a framework. If you didn't watch that video, I highly recommend you to watch it first. It's a really short video and I believe that it will answer all the questions in your mind about React. And after this information, let's see why we should use Next.js. Firstly, we can create all the pages using a single folder. Every child folder in the app router represents a new page. So it's really easy to create and group pages in Next.js. In React, on the other hand, we have to install a library and create our custom router. Secondly, if you are building a full stack application, you can create your own API using Next.js. Again, we can create API endpoints using the folder structure and handle requests in route files. But in React, to do that, you have to use a framework like Express.js and create a different application first. And the most important feature of Next.js is being able to use server-side and client-side components together. So you can fetch data on the server side and improve the SEO of the application. And also you can create client-side components to interact with users. I explained what's SSR and CSR in the previous video. You can go and check it out if you haven't. And the last thing I want to mention is the Next.js optimization. Next.js uses code splitting to improve the application's initial load time. It splits the bundle of the application into smaller chunks and serves them to users only when needed. And also, Next.js automatically optimizes images by compressing them and generating multiple sizes for different device resolutions. These are the most important features of Next.js, and there are many others. So let's start creating a full stack application and see how to use them in a real-world website. Okay, I created a new folder, and inside this folder, let's create our application. To do that, I'm going to open up the Next documentation. And here I will choose Installation. and make sure Node.js is installed on your computer. Of course, if you are watching this video, you already know the fundamentals, and I don't want to make this tutorial too boring by explaining every single step. So don't worry, I will explain only what you need to know. Okay, after that you are gonna see this command. I'm gonna copy this. This command allows us to install all the dependencies to build a Next app, and also it creates the default folders and files. Basically it sets everything up for us and we don't need any additional configuration. I'm gonna open my terminal and paste here, and I will say dot. That because I want to install everything in this folder. If you don't write here dot, it's gonna create a new folder. I don't want to do that. I will say enter, and it's gonna ask some questions to set up our application. We can use TypeScript, but I plan to create a TypeScript tutorial before using it in my videos, and that tutorial will probably be on the channel in June. And let's keep going after this information. We are gonna be using ESLint. I will say yes. ESLint is a tool that helps us to find and prevent potential errors. When we start coding, you will see how it works. I don't want to use Tailwind. It's not a good idea for beginners. Would you like to use source directory? You don't have to, you can say no, but I prefer using source directory because it helps me organize the folders. I will say yes. Of course, we are going to be using app router. I will say yes. And the import alias helps us to find the location of files. Because normally, if you don't make any configuration, you might have to import files like this, another folder, and finally, let's say components and navbar, for example. But if you choose alias, only thing you need to do is writing here at, for example, and it means you are in the root directory, and just say components, like that. So I will say yes, and it's gonna be at, and that's all. During this process, let's check the documentation and see how to start our application. And as you can see, we are gonna be using npm run dev, or if you are using yarn, yarn run dev, and it's gonna start our application localhost 3000. Let's do that. I'm using yarn, so I will say yarn run dev. I will enter. As you can see, it's running. I'm going to open up and it's here. So let's see which files allow us to see all these HTML elements. As you can see, those are our libraries. This is the cache data, and we have public and source folder. In this public folder, we will add all the images and other media items. Let's do that actually. I'm gonna delete those SVG files, we don't need them, and I'm gonna drag and drop my files like that. As you can see, social media icons and other images. Okay, I can close here, and the source folder will include our app folder and our components and other stuff. Let's create, actually, I will say components, and let's say utilities, for example. Basically, you can add here anything you want. Your libraries, if you are using database, you can create your models, database connection. We are gonna do all of them later. But now, let's talk about app directory. To understand the app router, let's see the structure first. Every page that we are going to create in the application will be located in this app folder. So this folder represents the home page. To create different pages, the only thing we should do is create different folders in this main folder. And to create subpages, we will create folders in the related parent folder. We just created a simple tree that includes different subtrees. Okay, we have certain names for each page, but how are we gonna create dynamic names for each blog post? It's really easy. Just use square brackets and provide an identifier like slug, ID, or whatever you want. So let's get back to the project and see how to do that. So let's create our pages. I will come here, and as you can see, this is the home page. I'm gonna delete everything here. We don't need them anymore. And I can shrink this terminal or close. Okay. And I'm just gonna create div here. By the way, as you can see, I can't use this shortcut to create HTML elements. To prevent this, I will come here and say JSX. Let's try one more. I will say div. And as you can see, it's here. I will enter. Okay, perfect. And I will say home. And it's here. Let's create other pages. I will come here and say about, and let's create our page file. I will say page.jsx. I'm gonna create my function by using this shortcut, and let's change the name. It's gonna be about page. If you wonder how I use that shortcut, just use ES7 React Redux React Native extension. It's an awesome extension. There are many shortcuts. You can just check on this page. Let's turn back and let's create other pages. I'm just gonna copy this and paste here. Let's say contact. I will paste one more. Let's say portfolio. Another one is gonna be the blog page. Let's say blog. And finally, dashboard. Let's change this page. Let's save this. Okay, they are ready. Let's check. I will say about. As you can see, it's here. Contact. Perfect. Blog. Okay, it works. So let's add our subfolder inside this block. Remember what we are doing? We are adding here square brackets, and inside you can write slug or ID or whatever you are gonna use to identify your blog posts. I'm gonna be using ID, and inside again a page file. Let's create quickly, and I will say post or blog post. Let's see right now. If I add here any ID, doesn't matter, it's gonna load this page. It's that easy. So it really doesn't matter how you are naming here. So I can do the same thing for portfolio. I'm gonna create new folder, and it's gonna be, let's say, category name. Or I can shorten this. It's too long. It's just gonna be category. Let's create our file, page file, React function, and I'm gonna name it. It's gonna be category. Let's see. I will say portfolio, and let's say test. And as you can see, it's here. So let's create some pages inside this dashboard. I'm gonna add a login page, a register page, and a home page of this dashboard. Let's do that. I'm gonna close them. And I will come here and say login. Let's copy this. Register. In our application, we are going to have only 3 pages, login, register, and home page. But let's imagine we have other pages like users, for example, settings, logs. And as you can see, our dashboard has many sub pages, and when I write some code inside my authentication folders like login and register, finding them can be a little bit difficult. But don't worry, there's an awesome feature. You can come here and create new folder, and you can write here any group name. let's say authentication, auth, and inside this folder, I can add my login page and register page. It's not gonna take this name as a route name. What I mean by that? If I come here and say auth and login, as you can see, it's not gonna work. That's because it's just a group name. If I delete this, as you can see, it's still here. So you can group your pages using this feature. I just wanted to show you, and I can close here. And let's talk about this layout file. Basically, it's a parent component that is used by other pages. So whatever you write here is gonna apply for all pages. Let's see. As you can see, it's here. If I go to homepage, it's here. And it's awesome that because we can use our common components like a navbar and footer component, so we don't have to write them again and again for each page. And moreover, you can create different layout for different routes. What I mean by that? If I open up blog, for example, and if I say layout.js, and let's say block layout, or whatever you say, I'm gonna take here the children component, and I'm gonna wrap this here. And you can write here whatever you want. Let's say h1, hey, this is block. Basically, it's gonna wrap all pages in this folder. Let's see. I'm gonna open up blog page. As you can see, it's here. And if I write here any post ID, and it's still here. Of course, there's a mistake here that because I used this text before this body tag, let's say main layout. Okay, it's here. Okay, right now instead of this text, let's create our navbar and footer. I'm gonna come here and create my component. Let's say navbar and footer. Let's create our files. I will say footer.jsx. I will create my function. And be careful here, we are not using page.js because it's a component, it's not a page. And I'm gonna create navbar.jsx. And let's use them here. I will delete this. I will say navbar component and footer. Let's see. As you can see, perfect. Let's open up portfolio. Oops. There is an error, of course. Inside body. Okay, awesome. Right now I can delete this block layout. I don't want to add anything here. I just wanted to show you. And let's actually add here our logo and some links. To do that, we are going to be using Next.js link component. As you can see, it comes from next and link. And let's say our website name. So basically it's an HTML anchor tag. Of course, it works in the app router. It allows us to navigate between pages. So we can give here any URL, href, and let's say homepage. So if I click here, as you can see, we are going to homepage. Perfect. I will say div. Of course, we are going to give some class names, but I'm going to explain them later. I will say link. Of course, you can write all these links one by one, but I don't want to do that. I will just use a data here. As you can see, it includes all the links we are going to need. So using this links array, I can map through this array and write each link. Let's do that. I will say links.map, and for each link, I'm gonna create a link component here, and I will write link.title. And as you can see, there's a warning here that because we are using ESLint, and it says the key property is missing. We have to give here a unique key. As you remember, we have IDs here. We can use them. I will say link.id, and href is going to be link.url. Let's see. Okay, perfect. If I click contact, about, dashboard, so it works. What about this footer? I will just copy here. We are going to add those images later. Let's open up footer. I'm going to create here a div. Actually, two divs. That's because first one is for this text and second one is for those images. Okay, it can stay like that. Let me explain you other layouts. And the first one will be loading layout. Basically, when we navigate between our pages, during the loading process, we can add here some indicator like loading text or a spinner or a skeleton component, whatever you want. It's a great feature for the user experience that because we are not showing a blank page. If you watch my React.js code splitting video, understanding this process will be easier for you. That because in that video, I explained how lazy loading and suspense work. It's exactly the same thing here, but we don't have to import our components by using lazy loading. Next.js does everything for us. The only thing what we need to do is decide what we are going to show to user. Let's try. For contact page, I will say loading.jsx, my component, and it's going to be loading. Let's see. Of course, if I click here, you cannot see that because our application is really fast. But if I open my console, choose network here, and I'm going to make my connection a little bit slower. Let's try right now. I'm going to click. As you can see, loading, and after that we see our page. This is how it works. And there is one more layout you can customize, and it's error.js. Basically, you can show any default error page to user. Of course, for this contact page, we don't need that because we are not fetching any data or anything else that can cause an error. But later, when we fetch any post here, we are going to create an error page and you are going to see how it works. And that's all. Remember, again, the layout.js is our main layout that wraps our components. You can use any layout inside your page folder also. And we have loading.jsx and error.jsx. By the way, I forgot how to add font family here. By default, Next.js is using Google font, so you don't have to go to fonts.google.com and choose any font family and paste to your CSS file. Just import your Google font like Roboto or anything else and create your font family like that and use it in this class name. And let's talk about Next.js rendering and how to render components. There are two types of rendering, the server side and the client side. In Next.js, by default, all components render on the server side. But you can change them easily by adding this use client directive. If you don't know which one to choose, let's watch this short animation from the previous video and remember the difference between SSR and CSR. When you visit your website, the server receives the request and sends an empty HTML file and a bunch of bundled JavaScript. And your browser processes those bundles and renders the final HTML file. So the initial page load speed of the application can be slow because of this process. And since the page is built on the user's browser, search engines cannot index websites properly. But on the server-side rendering, when you visit the website, the server receives the request and renders the HTML page and sends that to your browser. So if you have an old computer or phone, it's really good because your browser doesn't have to render everything from scratch. So it shows the initial page faster. But since everything happens on the server side, you won't be able to interact with the user. If you want to create an event, you have to create a client-side component. So if you have a highly interactive website, it might be really annoying. Basically, choosing SSR and CSR depends on your project. So let's see which rendering method we should choose for our application's components. So all those pages and components are server-side components. How we can see this? Let's write here console log, and let's open up our console here. It's still slow. Let's disable this, and I'm gonna open up console, and as you can see, it's empty. I will refresh and nothing is here. But if I open up my terminal, as you can see, it actually runs on the server side. But how we are gonna turn this component into client side? It's really easy. I will just write here, use client, and that's all. And as you can see, it's here. It actually runs on my browser, not on my server. But when we need to use client side, as I said, when you need any user interaction, you are gonna need a client-side component. For example, for the navbar, we don't have yet, but I'm gonna create here a button, and if we are authenticated, we will be able to log out. But to add here logout functionality, we are gonna be using authentication sessions, and it's gonna run on our browser. Basically, if we are authenticated, we are going to have a user session that includes our user information, and when I click on this button, we are going to delete this session immediately. To do that, we cannot use server-side rendering. I'm going to create here onClick method, and I'm going to write the logout functionality. Let's say console log, logged out. And if I come here, as you can see, if you need interactivity, just use client component. If I come here and add here, use client, it works. If I click, as you can see, logged out. So let's see here which components or pages we are gonna need interactivity. For the home page, as you can see, we don't need anything. We can only add here link. In this portfolio page, again, we don't need client side. When I click on those pages, we are gonna fetch these data. For the blog page, it's really important to use server-side rendering because here we are gonna be needing SEO. For each page, we are gonna use different title and description that search engines can index and show them on their pages. And you are gonna see later how to create dynamic page titles and descriptions. But for now, we are just checking should we use client or server side. For about and contact page, again, we are gonna be using server side. But for the dashboard, we are gonna need a user interaction. Users gonna enter their email and passwords, or they will be able to log in using social media, and they are gonna send them to our API, or for the register page, it's exactly the same thing. And in the home page of the dashboard, we will be able to add new posts. And if you are creating some complex dashboards that you want to show analytics or charts, you should be using client-side components. And for the dashboard, of course, we are not going to need SEO. It's going to be private. Only users can see the dashboard page. And for the navbar, as I said, we are going to be using a logout button here. And also we are going to be using this toggle button. Be careful, I'm going to click here and it's going to be totally white here. I don't want to hurt your eyes. Be ready. 3, 2, 1. And as you can see, we are going to be using this interactivity. And in this toggle component, we are going to be using client-side rendering. And this is why Next.js is great. That's because you can combine server-side and client-side components and build a complete application. And this is why I created this application, that because it's a perfect example to show server-side and client-side rendering. Of course, in real world, there is no application like that. As you can see, it's an agency application, but also you can add here your blog posts by creating new account. But I just wanted to show you everything in just one video. Okay, so let's see how to give a style for our HTML elements. Let's come here. I'm gonna close everything and open up navbar again. So let's see how we are gonna give class name. Basically, we have two ways to give class names. First, you can use global CSS. By the way, it's by default, we don't need them. Actually, I can use only here. I will copy and maybe here. Let's copy here. I will delete them and paste back. I don't want to make our background white. Let's say background color. And the color will be this gray color. And as you can see, those links are different. There's a default text decoration and color for those links. I'm gonna change them. Let's say anchor tag, text decoration will be none, and the color will be inherit. Basically, it's gonna take the color from its parent. And in this situation, the parent is body, and it's gonna be this color. Let's see. Okay, awesome. So when we are gonna use this global CSS, basically we are gonna use it only when we use a common HTML element, like this anchor tag. We are gonna use those links everywhere in our application. So those links don't belong to any page or component. It's a common element. And we can use it for our layout also. Let's create here a container. Of course, it's not a JSX file. I should use it like that. Class name and container. And I'm gonna wrap my items. And if I come here and write container and background color, for example, this purple color, as you can see, it's here. I can use it in my pages. For example, for this contact page, I will say class name and contact. And if I write here background color and let's say red, but as I said, it's not a common HTML element. It belongs only here. We are not gonna use it anywhere else. In this situation, instead of using this global CSS, we are gonna create a module CSS. So I will come here and I'm gonna create new file and I will say page.module CSS. And I will say contact and let's say background color, this brown color. So how I'm gonna use this, I will come here and I will just import it here. Import styles from page module CSS. And instead of this global class name, I will say styles.contact. And as you can see, it's here. And it's awesome that because, remember, we have used container here, I can use the same class name here. Let's say container, like that. As you can see, there is no conflict, so you can use this class name again and again. And if I inspect my page, I'll open up my body. And as you can see, this is the global name. It's exactly the same class name. But if you check here, it actually creates a new class name here. It's not container anymore. This is why there is no conflict. When you use module CSS, it creates a new class name just like styled components. Of course, you can give any name here. It doesn't have to be page module CSS, but for the consistency, we are going to be using in this way. So I can do the same thing for other pages. I'm going to copy this and paste for each page. And let's create our CSS file. Okay, I'm gonna speed up this process. I don't wanna waste your time. Basically, I'm just gonna import this style and give a container class name for each page and component. Okay, I created all those module CSS files like that, so it's ready to use. So let's take care of this container first. I'm gonna open up global CSS, and here, firstly, I'm gonna give a max width 1366 pixels, and I will say minimum height 100 VH. So it's gonna contain all this screen. And let's center everything, margin 0 and auto, basically 0 from top and bottom, auto from left and right. In this case, it's gonna be centered. I can give some padding from left and right, again 60 pixels, and I can separate my items like here. The first item on the top, the last item on the bottom, and in the center we are gonna have our children component. In this case, I can use display flex, but it's not gonna be horizontal. I will say flex direction column and justify content space between. Perfect, this is what I want. If I visit other pages, they all are same. What about this navbar? I'm gonna open up my components, navbar and module, and also my file here. Let's actually separate them like that. Okay. It's gonna be container. I will copy here, and this link will be our logo. This is the link container. Let's say links. And for each link, I'm gonna give class name, and it's gonna be just link. Let me shrink this CSS site, and for this button, let's say logout. That's all, I think. So what I'm gonna say is a height here first. Let's say 100 pixels. I'm gonna make this navbar horizontal like that. And again, I'm gonna separate them. Logo will be here, links will be here. Justify content space between. And I can center them vertically. Remember, it's 100 pixels. So I will say align item center. Perfect. What about this logo? Actually, I was thinking copy and paste the CSS file, but I know some of you want to see how to design. So if you are here for only functionalities, don't worry, it's gonna be really quick. We are not gonna make any complex design. I will just give font weight, it's gonna be bold, and I'm gonna increase font size. Like that. And for those links, I can separate them. Links, display flags, align item center, and I'm gonna give space between them like that. And for this logout button, I'm gonna give some padding. I will delete border. I will give background color. It's gonna be this green color. Oops, double. Okay. And the color will be white, and it's gonna be clickable. And finally, border radius, 3 pixels. Okay, awesome. Let's check. Okay, it's exactly the same. I'm gonna add this toggle later when I explain how to use context API. And for the footer, I'm gonna take this here and footer module here. Again, let's give height 50 pixels. I will say display flags, align item center, and I'm gonna separate them. Okay, of course there is nothing here. We are gonna add our images. To do that, we are not gonna be using image HTML tag anymore, like that. Instead, as you can see, there's an error here. It's not an error, but it's a warning. It says image could result slower loading time and higher bandwidth. Instead, you should use Next.js image. That's because Next.js takes our image and modifies it under the hood. It adds lazy loading, it arranges its sizes. I'm gonna copy this and I'm gonna import. As you can see, it comes from Next image. And here we are gonna add our source and also Auth, let's say Lama Dev, or your website name. Let's see our example. I'm going to open up portfolio. Okay, for example, this image. I took this image from paxos.com, but if I open this in new tab, as you can see, it's not directly opening paxos.com. Instead, it stores our image in the cache folder. And this is how it shows our images much faster. And let's see how we can add images. There are different ways to add images. First one, like here, you can use any external image URL and add it directly. Or if you are using your public folder, as we are gonna do right now, we are gonna be using this Facebook and other social icons. Let's do that. I will say 1.png, but as you can see, it says we have missing sizes. If you are adding your images, you have to provide here a width, let's say 15 pixels, and a height. And as you can see, it's here. We are doing this because Next.js is lazy loading our images. If you watch my previous video about lazy loading, you are going to understand everything better. Giving width and height is really important. But if you have any image container here, let's create a div here and I will say class name, image container. Let me close this sidebar. And instead of giving size for image, you can give size for the container like that. And you can delete here and say fill true. Basically, it's gonna fit inside this container. But if I do that, it's not gonna work. It's full screen right now. That's because this image fits inside the closest relative parent, and it's our body right now. To prevent this, I'm gonna say position relative. Oh, I didn't wrap. And as you can see, it's here. But we don't need any container. I'm just gonna directly give here width and height. I just want to show you how you can do this, because for the next images, we are gonna use container. I can delete here. And I'm gonna add other images here. By the way, you can change here, Facebook account, Instagram, and others. It really doesn't matter. It can stay like that. Let's see. Oops, I forgot deleting this. If you are using width and height, you don't need fill. And they are here. Okay. Let's give class name here. Styles.social. Again, I'm going to separate them. Align item center, and gap between them will be 10 pixels. And I'm going to add here font size. It's going to be small, like that. Okay. Now for each icon, let's copy this class name. And I'm going to add here, and it's going to be icon. I'm going to decrease the opacity 0.6. It's going to be 60%. And I will say cursor pointer, so we can click. Okay. Of course, you can add here link, but I'm not going to add any account. They can stay like that. If you want to, you can wrap them with Next.js link. But anyway, I'm going to close them. And I want to show another way to add our local image. Let's open up sidebar, and I can close components, and I'm going to open up the home page. And here we are going to be using this image, hero.png. Of course, you can directly use image, source, and alt. Now you can write here hero.png, but also you can import that as a component. So I will come here and say the public folder hero.png. And here you can give any name. Let's say hero. And I'm going to add this in source. Let's open up our homepage. And as you can see, it's here. But there is one thing different here. We didn't provide here any width or height. But there is no problem. If you are importing your images like that, you don't have to write width and height. You can just give here class name, styles.image, and you can give any size using your module CSS file. But I recommend using a path here instead of importing it like that. And one more thing about images, when you add an external image, it's going to be a problem. Let's see. I'm going to open up pexels.com. Let's choose any image here. I'm going to add. As you can see, there's an error, but it's a different error. It's a size error. Let's give width, height. But even if I do that, it's going to be another error here. And this is happening because Next.js doesn't allow us to use an external image by default. If you want to use any different domain name, you have to write it in your configuration file, next.config.js. How we are going to do that? Let's open up next.config.js, and I'm going to add here external domains. To do that, I'll say images, and inside this object, we are going to add our domains. It's going to be an array because you can add multiple domains. And the first one will be images pexels.com. And if you have another domain, you can add it like that. But we are going to be using only this website, so we don't need that. I will delete. I just want to show you. And let's see right now. And as you can see, it's here. And this is how you can use images. When you add any path here, you have to give width and height. If you are using external domain, just add it here. And you can add your images using import. Let's take this back. Okay. So let's see what we are going to have. I'm going to open up homepage. As you can see, we are going to have two parts, this text and this image. Let's design our homepage. I'm going to create a div here. class name, styles, let's say texts, and one more is gonna be image. Actually, let's say image container. In this text, we are gonna have this title. I'm gonna copy. Let's add a p tag. And what else? This button. See our works. Actually, for those divs, I can give exactly the same name. Let's say item and item. That's because we are not gonna apply any CSS for those items. We are just gonna separate this container into two pieces. First item and second item. As you can see, their sizes exactly the same. So we don't need to change here. And let's give class name for title, description, and button. Let's open up our CSS file. As you can see, this is by default. I can delete them. And I forgot here container. And let's start. As I said, it's going to be horizontal, align item center, and gap between them will be 100 pixels. This gap. And for each item, I will say flex 1. Basically, half of the screen will be item 1 and the other half will be item 2. Let's see here. Of course, we didn't give any width and height. This is why it looks like that. If you remember, we have a class name here. I will say width 100%. It's gonna fit inside its parent, and height will be, let's say, 500. And I will say object width cover. And awesome. So what about those items? Actually, I can give space between them also. I will say display flags, flags direction column, and gap between them 50 pixels, like that. So let's increase this font size and give this color effect. After this item, I will say title. Font size will be really big, like that. And I'm gonna give background, and it's gonna be linear gradient. It's gonna start from top, and at the bottom it's gonna be this gray color. To do that, I will say to bottom, and the first color will be this green color, and at the bottom it's gonna be gray, like that. But how I'm gonna delete this background and show it in our text? It's really easy. I'm gonna be using WebKit background clip. It's gonna be text, and WebKit text fill color is gonna be transparent. This is what I wanted. Let's increase this font size and give style for this button. It's going to be 24 pixels. Font weight will be thinner. For the button, I'm going to give padding. Cursor will be pointer. And background color, again, our green color. I'm going to delete the border. It's going to be none. And border radius, like that. I can decrease this button size. I will say maximum content, and of course it's gonna be white. And that's all. Let's quickly create our about page. Let's close everything here, and open up page and the CSS file. We have a container here, and inside, let's see what we are going to create. Again, we are going to have two parts, this image container and text container. In this image container, we are going to add this image and this text. And in this text container, we are going to have two parts again. First item, second item, and those elements. Let's do that. I'm going to copy this. It's going to be image container and text container. And in this container, we are going to have our image. I will say fill true, that because we are going to be using image container. Remember. And the source will be the external image. I will just copy and paste here. Like that. And let's give a class name for this image. And after that, another div. Let's say image text. And in this container, we are going to have this title. Let's say h1. And h2 is going to be this text. Let's say image title and image description. What about here? We are going to have two items. Let me copy this and paste inside. Let's say item and one more. And inside the first item, we are going to have this title, this description, of course you can add here any space like that. I will give break, and their class names, title and description. It contains all our screen because we didn't give position relative for the image container. We are going to fix that. But for the other side, let's see. One more title. Actually, I can copy this and move it into second item like that. What we do. And this description and a button. But if you remember, we have used same button here. So what we can do, we can create a common component and use them here. I'm going to open up components, button, JSX, and its CSS file. I'm going to import this here. And use it here. And we can take the text and URL as a prop and use it here. I will say link, and I can wrap this button actually like that. And href will be this URL, and the text will be here. Of course, it's not going to be div, it's going to be a button. And I'm going to open up my homepage module CSS. And I'm going to cut this and paste here. Container. So I can use it here. But before, this text. Let's give break. And after this p tag, I'm gonna call my button. And I'm gonna pass here the URL. It's gonna be the contact page. And the text will be contact. It was text or title. Okay, text. So I can do the same thing for the home page. I'm gonna copy this. For the home page, actually let's paste it like that and paste this text. And it's gonna be portfolio. Let's call our component and delete this. By the way, as you can see, this is how we are using aliases. It directly navigates us to the root directory and it looks much better. Let's see, by the way, I'm gonna open up the home page. As you can see, it's exactly the same. So let's give style. I can close them. Let's close this sidebar and actually let's take care of this container and we can see our image. I will save it 100%, height 300, and don't forget position relative, perfect. And for this image, I will say object with cover, that because it looks really weird. And cover, and it's gonna cover its parent, like that. And for the black and white effect, we are gonna be using filter. I will say filter, and grayscale will be 100%, like that. And for the image text, I can use position absolute. Let's copy this. I will say position absolute. Bottom will be 20 pixels, left will be 20 pixels, like that. 20 from left, 20 from bottom. And I'm gonna give background color. And let's give some padding, like that. And I can change the color, it's gonna be white. Okay, and for this text container, I'm gonna separate my items. To do that, remember what we are doing. We are gonna be using flexbox. Let me make this bigger. Display flags. I'm gonna give gap between them. And for each item, again, flags 1. They are gonna be exactly the same size. Like that. I can give margin here. Margin top. And for each item, I'm gonna give again gap. To do that, I'm gonna be using flags direction column, and gap between each item will be 30 pixels, like that. By the way, I can give here more breaks. And let's check. Okay, I'm gonna increase this font size. Let's check what was the name. Description, by the way, I didn't give for the other item. Okay. I will say font size 18, font weight will be 300, and I will say text align justify. As you can see, it looks much better. They all end at the same point. Perfect. And what about this contact page? It's really easy. There's a title here, and after container, display flags, image, and this form. Let's do this quickly. I'm gonna close them, open up contact page, and open up contact module CSS, and I'm gonna take this here. Again, I'm gonna add here a title, and I'm gonna add a div here, which includes our items. The first item will be image container, and the second one will be our form. Actually, let's change this. It's gonna be form element. And in this container, I'm gonna add my image. I'm passing here quickly that because you know how to create this. And inside this form, I'm gonna add an input. Let's give a placeholder. It's gonna be name, and of course class name is gonna be input. Another one, and it's gonna be email. And I'm gonna add here a text area. Let's delete them. Class name and text area. And of course a placeholder, and let's say message. And finally, I'm gonna add here a button. URL will be just empty, and the text will be sent. Let's take care of this image container. Firstly, I will say content, display flags, gap between them 100, and align item center. And for the image container, I will say flags 1, because remember, this item and this item will be exactly the same size. And the second item is form, like that. And I'm gonna give height for this container, that because we have to give height for our image. And of course, position relative. Perfect. What about this title? I can add this here. Font size will be bigger. I will say margin bottom. And text align will be center. Like that. And finally, for this form, I'm going to separate my items by giving gap between them. And for each input, and also for the text area, I'm going to give some padding. I'm going to delete the background color because by default it's white, but we are going to be using dark mode. And as you can see, it's going to be exactly the same color. And let's delete this border and this outline. Border none. Outline none. I will give color. And I'm going to change this border. It's going to be 3 pixels, solid, and this gray color. And I can increase this font size. It's too small. Font weight is going to be bold. Let's see. As you can see, there's an animation here. And also in our homepage, there's an animation. Let's add them. For this image, where's our image? Okay, I didn't create. Let's say object fit cover. As you can see, when we cover this container, it cuts our image. Instead, I'm gonna use contain. Perfect. And let's give an animation. I will say animation. Let's give an animation name. Doesn't matter. I will just say move. It's gonna take 3 seconds. It's gonna be infinite, and the timing function will be is. And I will say alternate. So when the animation ends, it's gonna make the same movement. And let's create this animation using keyframes. Animation name from, I'm gonna use transform effect and translate y, and let's say 15 pixels. Basically on the y-axis it's gonna move 15 pixels and it's gonna come back like that, and it takes 3 seconds. And I want to add something more here. I will say 2. It's gonna come back to initial position 0 pixels, but also I'm gonna increase the scale. It's gonna be like that. As you can see, it's fading. Perfect. And what about this home page? As you can see, it's easier. I'm gonna copy here. Let's open up our home page here. And for the image, okay, it's here. I'm gonna paste my animation. It's just gonna be 10 pixels and 10 pixels. I'm gonna delete this. Let's see. Okay. By the way, as you can see, again, I'm gonna change this object width and it's gonna be contain. Okay, it's much better. So we created our home page, about, and contact pages. And for now, I'm gonna delete those animations. That's because when I edit this tutorial, sometimes I'm increasing the video speed. And when I increase the speed or cut the video, it's gonna look weird. That's the reason. At the end of the video, I'm gonna give this animation back. Okay, let's close everything. And let's create the portfolio page. In the portfolio page, let's see, we are gonna have 2 titles and 3 items here. And each item has background image and this text here. It's really easy. Let's create. I'm gonna open up portfolio page and CSS. Quickly, I'm gonna create this title and I will say items. Of course, it's not a global style. I will say styles, items, and I'm gonna create link here, Next.js link. And the first one will be portfolio illustrations. And inside I'm gonna create a span and it's gonna say illustrations. Let's give class name. This link is gonna be item and this span will be title. So let's do the same thing for other items. It's gonna be websites and applications. And I want to show you one more thing here. As you can see, there's a main title here. And if I click any sub page, as you can see, it's still here. It means it's a layout. Let's create. Inside portfolio, I will say layout. So I'm gonna create here h1 tag, our works, and I'm gonna give class name. And I will say styles dot main title. Let's import our styles. And of course, I will say children. And I'm gonna use right after this h1 tag. Let's see. As you can see, it's here. Let's give a style. I will say 100 pixels. Okay. And this title, I'm just gonna give margin from top and bottom like that. And for each items, let's close here. Let's actually make this display flags and gap between them. And finally, for each item, I'm gonna give border, it's gonna be 5 pixels, solid and gray. I will say border radius 5 pixels. Let's give width and height, and I will say position relative. I'm doing this because we are gonna be using position absolute for these texts. Let's do that actually. I will say title, position absolute, right 10, bottom 10, and font size will be bigger, and font weight will be bold. Oops, not here. Okay, perfect. Why they are square? Oh, it's gonna be 400. And for each item, I'm gonna be using different background images. Let's check our public folder. As you can see, we are gonna be using those images. To do that, I'm gonna be using nth child. So for the first child, I'm gonna say background. I will say URL, public folder, illustration.png. And it's here. Of course, we need object width here, but it's not an image. To do that, I'm gonna come here and say background size. And it's gonna be cover. But this background is gonna overwrite this. To prevent this, I will say important and perfect. And for the second and third item, it's gonna be website and apps. Of course, second and third. Okay, perfect. When I hover over, I want to change this text color. Let's do that. When I hover over this item, it's gonna affect our title, and the color will be our green color. Oops, hover. Like that. Okay, it works. And when I visit any of those pages, let's see what we are gonna have. We are gonna have a title here, and after we are gonna create those items. But how we are gonna choose this category name? To do that, we are gonna be using params property. Let's open up the ID page. Sorry, category ID is block. I'm gonna write here params, and let's console log. I'm gonna open up my terminal, and as you can see, it says category illustration. If I visit websites, for example, as you can see, it's here like that. Basically, we can choose this category to write here our title. So I'm gonna come here and say h1 tag params.category. Like that. Okay, let's give a class name. And after that, we are gonna create our items. Of course, we are gonna fetch different items for each category. But for now, for the design purpose, we can add exactly the same items for each page. So I'm gonna come here and say div, it's gonna be item, And inside, we are going to have this image container and this content container. I will copy this. First one will be content, and the second one will be image container. Let's create this title, this p tag, and this button. h1 test p tag description, and remember we have a button component, we can use it. I will say text, see more, and we are not going to have any URL. Let's leave it like that. And for the image, let's add here Next.js image. And of course, I'm going to say fill and true. Okay, we are going to handle this, but before, let's give class name. I will say image, title, and description. Let's open up CSS. First one will be category title. Color will be our main color. For item, I will say display flags, and let's give a gap, and I'm going to give margin top 50 pixels and margin bottom 100 pixels. For top and for bottom. Let's take care of this image. Remember, we have an image container. Flags will be 1. I will do the same thing for the content. And for the image container, height will be 500 and position relative. Oops, there's no semicolon here. Okay. And of course, object fit. And after that, I'm going to give display flags, flags direction column for this item, for this content. Object fit cover. And display flags, flags direction, and gap between them. Actually, in our example, as you can see, I used justify content center. Like that. But in this example, as you realize, the first item and the second item is different. The content is here and the image is here, but in this example, the image is here and the content is here. Again, we can use and child. I'm going to find the item, and I will say and child. And if the child number is even number, flags direction will be row reverse. Let's see. Of course, we are going to need more items here. I'm going to duplicate. As you can see, first item, second item. Okay, in this example, the first item is like that. It's going to be odd number. Like that. Okay. Of course, it looks weird because we don't have any title or description, but when we complete, it's going to look much better. By the way, I can increase this title and description. $50 pixels, oops, 50. For the description, 20 pixels. Okay, so what about this blog page? As you can see, it's really easy. Again, image container, content. There is nothing different, so I don't want to waste your time doing same thing again and again. So I will just copy and paste my code. Let's close everything here. And I'm going to close portfolio, contact, and about page, and I'm going to open blog. I will come here and create a link. Let's import this and this image. And I'm going to give here any test ID. Of course, we are going to change it. Let's add here this image, test, and description. I'm going to add more items and I'm going to give style. Like that. And I'm going to open up CSS and paste my style. As you can see, it's exactly the same thing. But there is something wrong. Because I said container, but we already have container here. Let's say main container. Okay, perfect. And let's open up any blog post here. Of course, I didn't add blog here. Let's change it. I'm gonna take them and write here blog. Okay, it's here. And let's check what we have. We are gonna have two containers, this top and bottom. And in the top container, we are gonna have our content and image container and this description. Let's do that. Let's open up ID and CSS. And inside container, I will just paste my code. As I said, top container, bottom container, and inside this bottom, we have just this text. And for the top container, we have information div, which includes our title, description, and the user information, this image and this text. And for the right side, we have image container and the image. There is nothing complex. If there is something different, I'm always coding, but we are writing exactly the same thing. And I'm gonna paste my code. Like that. Okay, we created our main design. I'm not gonna design this dashboard right now because we are gonna be using authentication here. We are gonna have login and register operations, and we are gonna hide this dashboard. It can stay like that for now. And let's see how we can create dark mode here. In our example, firstly we are gonna create this button. We will give this animation, and after that we are gonna implement context API. I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna create a new component. Let's say dark mode, maybe dark mode toggle. Let's create its files. And CSS. I'm gonna give my class name here, styles container. And here we will have two icons. Let's say div again. And the first icon will be a moon, and the second one will be a sun. Let's give class name. I will say icon. And finally, I'm gonna create this circle, this ball that we can toggle. I will duplicate this. Actually, I can delete here. It's gonna be only background color. And I will say ball. Let's give a style. Firstly, I'm gonna give a width and height. I will give a border, 1.5 pixels, and I will give our green color a little bit darker, And I will say border radius 30 pixels. Let's see. I'm gonna open up navbar. And inside links, I'm gonna call my component dark mode toggle. Okay, it's here. Let's make everything horizontal. I will say display flags, justify content space between, like that. Let's create the ball. By the way, I can give some space here. It's gonna be small space like that. Of course, I should center them vertically, so I will say align item center. Okay, perfect. Let's create the ball. But first, I'm gonna decrease the icon size. They are too big. Okay, perfect. So let's create ball. It's gonna be 15 pixels. I'm gonna give our main color, background color, and border radius will be 50%. It's gonna be a circle. And finally, I will say position absolute. Of course, if you are using absolute, as always, you should come here and say position relative because it's the parent. And as you can see, perfect. And I will say cursor pointer. So we can click and let's give our animation. But I'm not gonna do this in this CSS file. I'm gonna give this animation here. That's because when we change the dark mode, we have to take that variable from context API in our component, this toggle component. And according to that value, we should move this ball. Let's see. As you can see, it's on the right. And when I click, it's light mode right now, and it's moving to left side. Okay, let's do that. I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna give an inner style. Firstly, let's write here mode, and it's gonna be dark mode, for example. And I will say if mode is light, left will be 2 pixels. If it's dark, right will be 2 pixels. I'm giving 2 pixels, that's because we have a space here. Where is our style? We have a space. So if it's dark mode, as you can see, it's on the right. And if it's light mode, as you can see, it's on the left. But how we are gonna take this value? To do that, we are gonna be using React Context API. I'm gonna come here and create a new folder. Let's say context. And I'm gonna create team context. If you are using Context API, your component should be client-side component. So I will say use client. And let's create our context. I will say export const team context. Create context. It comes from React. And right now I'm gonna create my context provider. Again, export const team provider. It's gonna be wrapper, so we should take here the children prop, and we should wrap our application with this provider. Remember how we are using this layout? We are taking the children and wrapping that children with this layout provider. We will do exactly the same thing. But before, let's use here use state hook that we can change the mode. I will say const mode set mode use state, and at the beginning it's gonna be a light mode or dark mode, whatever you like. Let's say dark mode, and we will be able to set this data. To do that, I'm gonna create a function. Let's say const toggle. and I'm gonna set mode. I'm gonna take the previous value and I'm gonna write a condition. If previous value equals dark, it's gonna be light. If it's light, it's gonna be dark. If you don't know why we are using previous, you can watch my React use state video. It includes everything you need to know about use state. Okay, right now we can return our provider, team contacts.provider, and we are gonna wrap our children, and we are able to send anything to our children. To do that, we are gonna be using value. And inside, let's send our function, and also we can send the mode. In this case, any children, any page or component will be able to use this toggle function or this value. So let's wrap our app. I'm gonna open up layout, and after body, I will say team provider, like that. But how we are going to change our theme? I can come here and create here a div, and I can give any class name here, and it's going to be a global class name. It's going to be theme and also the mode, theme light or theme dark. So let's open up our CSS file, global CSS, and here I will say if it's light mode, let's take this background and color from here and paste here. The background will be white and the color will be this dark color. And if it's the dark mode, it's gonna be dark background and light text color. Let's see. Oh, I didn't return here. Of course, we are gonna return this provider. Right now, I'm gonna take this toggle function and use it in my component. And when I click here, we are gonna toggle between our modes. Let's come here. Right now, we are gonna take this mode from context API. To do that, we are gonna be using use context hook. I will say const. Take the toggle function from use context and team context. And of course, we are gonna need this mode. Remember, we are sending this mode also. We are gonna use it here. And when I click on this container, I'm gonna toggle between modes. So I will say on click and toggle. In this case, this component should be client side. So I will say use client. Let's try. I will click. As you can see, perfect. But the transition is too sharp. I'm gonna give an animation. This is why I gave here team class name. I will say transition, 1 second, all animations and ease. Like that. Perfect. Okay, awesome. It looks really nice. And right now, let's see how to fetch data using Next.js. In Next.js, you can fetch data using both server-side and client-side components. On the client side, you can use traditional methods like useEffect, React query, or SWR. In this case, your component will be rendered first, then it will try to fetch the data. And on the server side, we will change our components into async components, and we will directly fetch the data on the server. If your data never changes, you can use static fetching and cache the result on the server. If your data changes but not too often, you can revalidate it in every desired second And if your data changes all the time and you want to fetch the fresh data on every request, you can use dynamic fetching. So let's give examples for each situation in our application. So let's come here and open up data fetching. As you can see, in our server-side component, we are going to create a getData function, and inside this function, we are going to fetch our data from an API, and if everything is okay, we are going to return this JSON file. If it's not, we are just going to throw an error. Let's do that. I'm going to copy here, and let's close everything here and open up blog page here. I'm going to come here and call getData function. And instead of this API, we are going to be using JSON placeholder for now. Of course, we are going to be using MongoDB. I'm just showing you how to use data fetching. And here, let's choose posts. As you can see, it sends us some fake data. Let's copy this and paste here. So it's going to return us 100 posts, and we can use them here. Let's call this data here. I will say async, don't forget that. And I will say const data equals await getData function. Right now, let's give here only one link, and I'm gonna delete the others like that. I'll say map, and for each item inside, return this link. There's a warning that because we don't have any key, unique key, and in our API, as you can see, there's a unique key, this ID, we can use it. Key equals item.id. Right now, instead of this title, we can use this post title. So I will say item.title. Let's see. All items are here. This is how we fetch data. And by default, let's check here. This fetch function fetches our data and forces to cache. It means Next.js is caching our data, and when we make requests, it returns that cached data. And it's called static data fetching. And if you revalidate your data, you can use this Next.js function. I will come here. By the way, I can delete here. And here. And I'm gonna paste it right after API fetching. And it's gonna revalidate our data in every 10 seconds. Cache lifetime is 10 seconds. And if your data is changing all the time, you can use no cache, as you can see. Like that. It's gonna fetch in every request. So let's leave it like that. And let's do the same thing for the single post. We are gonna fetch data according to our post ID. But how we are gonna take this ID here? We have already seen that. We are gonna be using params. Let's copy this data, getData function, and open up ID. I'm gonna paste it here, but we are gonna need here our post ID. Let's check. If I say posts 1, for example, it's just gonna fetch this post. So we are gonna need our ID. I will say params. Remember, in this params, there is an ID that because our Slack name is ID. And I will say const data. Await, of course, it should be async function. I will say get data, and I'm gonna pass here params.id. And I'm gonna take this ID here. And I'm just gonna add it here. ID. Of course, I should use backtick. I'm using JavaScript inside. And let's see, I'm gonna take this data and I will change this title. Data.title. And of course, we are sending directly. We don't have to destructure this. I'm gonna take this like that. Let's see. And as you can see, there's an error that because we don't have post with this ID. But if I write 1, as you can see, it's here. But instead of this error, if you want to, you can create here error.js, or if you want to, you can return not found page. To do that, I will say return not found, and it comes from Next.js navigation. As you can see, not found, but if I change here, let's say 12, as you can see, perfect, it works like that. Right now we know how to fetch data in the server side, dynamic and static, but how we are going to fetch data in the client side. Let's open up dashboard, for example. And here I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I will fetch this data. What we are doing, remember, we are writing here a use state, const data, set data, and we are using use state hook. And at the beginning, let's give an empty array. And remember, our dashboard is a client-side component, use client, and I can use here use effect. And let's create our function const get data. It's going to be an async function, and I'm going to call this response. If there is no response, we can add here one more use state, and we can say error set error. At the beginning, it's going to be false, and we can set it here. By the way, we are going to need is loading variable, and when we try to fetch data, it's going to be true. And if everything is okay, we are going to set this data, and we are going to set is loading to false. It's going to be response.json. And finally, we are going to call this function here. And let's see our data. I'm going to open up. Where is our app here? Let's open the console. Okay, it's still pending. There is something wrong. Of course, it's an async operation also. I will say const data. It's going to be await response JSON. So I'm going to pass here data. And as you can see, our data is here. Okay, you can fetch your data using use effect, but I don't recommend using use effect anymore. Instead, you can use something like React Query, because those kind of libraries come with error and is loading out of the box. And also you will be able to mutate your data. So instead of use effect, I'm just gonna comment this out like that. We are gonna be using Next.js SWR hook. Let's come here, SWR. There's a use effect function. We have created something like that. And as you can see, this library is highly recommended because you are able to cache your data or make a revalidation. Let's copy this library. I'm going to open up terminal. npm install or yarn add SWR. And when we use this hook, it returns us error data, and also it returns is loading. It's not here, but let's open up this documentation actually. Okay, as you can see, data error is loading. And what's this fetcher? Basically, you can use any library or JavaScript fetch to retrieve your data. In this example, as you can see, it uses the fetch function, and after the response, it takes that response and returns the JSON data. So we can do the same thing here. I'm gonna take this fetcher and our function. Let's paste our URL here. What was the URL? Just copy and paste. And let's see. I'm gonna open my app. Of course, I didn't import. Let's import here. I'm gonna open my console, and as you can see, it's here. And this is how we are gonna fetch our data in the client side. When we create this dashboard, you will see how to add or delete data. But before, I want to show you how to fetch local data for different galleries. Let's close everything here and open up portfolio. And inside category, I'm gonna create a new file, and let's say data.js. And inside this file, I'm just gonna paste my items for application, illustrations, and websites. We are gonna have 9 items here. And using this file, we are gonna fetch our gallery items. Let's shrink this and close here. I will do exactly the same thing here. Let's say get data. We are gonna take the category, and I'm gonna fetch our data from data.js, and I'm gonna just filter these items. So let's say const data, items, and category. Oops, not item, items. And if there is a data, return this data. If there is no, return not found from next navigation. Let's take this data. I will say const get data, and I'm gonna pass here params.category because our folder name is category. So let's take this data right now, and I'm gonna delete those items. I'm just gonna leave the first one like that, and I'm gonna use a map, data.map, and for each item inside our gallery items, I'm gonna return this div. Of course, we need a key, item.id. Let's check. Okay, ID, title, description, and image. Let's write them here. Item.title, description, and image. Let's see. I'm gonna click. There's something wrong. Okay, it's not img, it's image. And perfect. If I write here something else instead of illustration, website, or application, as you can see, not found. It's that easy, guys. Before AppRouter, it was a little bit complex, but right now it's really easy. Just create your getData function and fetch your data using an API or local file. Right now, instead of any local file or external API, we are gonna be creating our own API. So let's open up cloud.mongodb.com, and after the authentication, you are gonna see this page. Let's create a new project. I will say Lama Dev. I will create a project, and I'm gonna build a database. Let's choose this free option. You can choose any provider or region. Let's leave it like that, and I will create. Oh, I hate this. Okay, it was easy one. So right now I'm gonna create a username and a password. I will say Lama Dev, and password will be again Lama Dev. Of course, after this tutorial, I'm gonna delete this cluster, create new user. We are gonna be using MongoDB Cloud, so I will choose this one. And you can add here your IP address, but for the test purpose, I'm gonna add 0, and it's gonna allow anyone to reach our database, of course, if they know the username and password. It's just for the test purpose. After deploying your application, you can add here your server IP address, and I will add and finish and close. And during this process, let's come here and add one more library, and it's gonna be Mongoose. I'll say yarn add Mongoose. Okay, basically this library allows us to create our MongoDB models and create CRUD operations. What I'm gonna do is coming here and creating an env file. This file is really important because we are gonna hide our secret keys here, like our MongoDB URL. Okay, it's here. Right now I'm gonna choose connect. I will say drivers. And as you can see, this is our secret URL. I will copy and I will say Mongo equals this URL. And you can write here any database name. Let's say test. And here I'm gonna change this password. Remember, it was Lama Dev. And we are ready to use this URL. Let's close here. And if you remember, I've created utils folder here, and inside, let's say db.js. And using Mongoose, we are gonna try to connect to MongoDB. I will say import Mongoose. And let's see how we are gonna use it. I will say read the docs. Let's choose here connection. And as you can see, this is how we connect to our DB. But I'm gonna be using try catch method. Let's see. Error handling. As you can see, we can use try catch. If there's an error, we can warn the user. Let's copy this. I will say const connect is gonna be an async function because we are making a connection, and I will paste here. And instead of this URL, I'm gonna pass my own URL. It's inside my env file. To call this, I'm gonna use process env. And remember, what was the name? Just Mongo. And if everything is okay, it's gonna connect. If there is something wrong, we can maybe throw error and connection failed. And finally, I'm gonna send this connect method. By the way, if I remember correctly, Mongoose is using version 7. Actually, I want to use this version because there might be some errors while using the version 7. So I'm gonna open up my package.json and I'm gonna change here. Let's open up terminal and I will say npm install or just yarn, and it's gonna install Mongoose version 6. That because I've tried version 7 and there was some errors, and to prevent those errors you have to write a lot of configuration. But just use this stable version, everything will be easier. And okay, our connection is ready. Right now we can create our models. Let's create new folder. And we are gonna have the user model and post model. So let's create our MongoDB schema. Again, Mongoose, and I will say const schema is going to come from Mongoose. Let's copy this here. And I will say const user schema, new schema. And inside, let's see what we are going to have. First, the user is going to have a name. And its type will be string. It's going to be unique. Every user has different username, so it's going to be true. And it's going to be required. Because we cannot create any user without username. And what else? We are going to have an email. Again, string, unique, and required. And we are going to have a password. It's going to be string, required, but it doesn't have to be unique. And one more thing here, I'm going to create timestamps. Basically, when we create any user, it's going to create created at and updated at time. Let's export this schema, export default. We are going to create Mongoose model. And the model name will be user. And we are going to pass this schema. Basically, it's going to create a user collection in our database. There's a collection here. Of course, it's empty right now. And when we create our DB, remember, the database name is test. And in this test database, we are going to have user collection. So I'm going to copy here and paste for posts. It's going to be post schema. Like that. And a post is going to have, let's see, title, this short description, username, image, and the content. Let's create title, string, unique, and required. Actually, I can play it here. And let's say description, image, content, and username. Okay, so let's see how we can create our own API. To do that, I'm going to open up app directory and I will create API folder. And again, we are going to do exactly the same thing. We are going to write our endpoints using folder structure, like posts, for example. And this is going to be our endpoint. Basically, when we use localhost 3000 API and posts, it's going to open up this endpoint and it's going to take get, post, update, or delete requests. To do that, I'm going to create here Route.js. It's really important. This name should be Route.js, just like Page.js. Don't change it. And I'm going to write a get request, for example. I will say export const get. We are going to get a request from user. Of course, it's going to be an async function. And we are going to fetch data from MongoDB. And if everything is okay, we are going to return a response. I will say return new next response. And we can send anything. It works. And let's say status 200 or whatever you want to return. I prefer using it like that. Our data and its status. By the way, it comes from Next server. Like that. And let's try API posts. I will say. And as you can see, the answer is here. This is how we create our API. Right now, let's connect to our DB. I will say import connect from DB. Remember, we have created here. We are going to connect to our DB. Let's say try catch block. If there's an error, we are going to send a response, but this time it's going to be an error. Let's move this here actually. And I will say database error. Let's say 500. Of course, we are not going to handle every single error here. And I will say await connect. And after the connection, finally we can fetch all posts from DB. I will say const posts. Again, await post model. By the way, I will say find, and it's gonna fetch all posts. I'm not gonna write here any condition. And after that, if everything is okay, we are gonna return our response, and it's gonna be the posts and status 200. Of course, if I refresh, it's not gonna return anything. By the way, our models is not in our source folder, and context also. Let's open up our layout. There is a problem here. It's gonna be at, of course, everything should be in source folder except of this public folder. This is how we are using at. And let's try. As you can see, it's empty. That's because we don't have any post yet. And when I refresh the page, as you can see, it created this test database. I will zoom in, and we have post collection. And it's empty. Let's add some documents to see better. I will say title, test, another one, description, image, and content, and finally username. Okay, I will insert. It's here. Let's try again. I will refresh. And as you can see, it's here. So we can use this API in our blog page right now. Let's open up blog, page.js, and I'm going to change this URL. It's going to be localhost 3000 API and posts. Let's see. I will say blog. As you can see, there is an error here. That's because we didn't stringify our posts in our API. Remember, we are taking response JSON here, so we have to send stringified version of this post. I will say JSON, stringify, and posts. And it's here. Let's change here. We are going to be using data image. And I'm going to open up my post model. I'm not sure if it's image. Okay, I said img. Let's change this. Description. By the way, it's not data, it's item. Finally, I'm going to change this URL. And it's going to be item._id, because in the MongoDB, as you can see, our ID is this ID. Let's check. I will refresh. I will click. As you can see, our ID is here. Right now, we are going to patch this single post. Let's do that. I will copy here and paste here like that. Again, we are going to be using posts endpoint, but additionally, we are going to send these params, this ID. Let's come here. This is our API, posts, and inside. Again, I will say ID and route.js. Let's copy here and paste. But this time we are going to need our ID. To do that, we are going to take params. And inside these params, remember, we have ID. equals params. And using this ID, we can search post by ID. So I will say find by ID, and I'm going to pass this ID. And if everything is okay, it's going to return this post. Let's see. I'm going to refresh, but of course it's going to be block. There is something wrong here. Okay, it's going to be block and its ID. Let's add here block. And as you can see, it's here. Let's change our items here. I'm going to take this data. We already have this title. I'm going to change here. It's going to be description, image, username, post image, and content. Let's see. I will refresh. As you can see, they are here, and this image. But if I change here, as you can see, not found, it works as we expected. Right now, I want to show one more thing here. When we fetch any data, as you can see, the title is still the same. We are using same title for each page. As you can see, it's not changing. So what I want to do is change the page title and description for each page. Doing this is really easy using Next.js. Let's open up our application. I will close everything here and let's check our layout. And as you can see, we can use any metadata using this function. I will change my application title. It's going to be Lama Dev, and the description. This is the description. Let's see. As you can see, it has changed. I'm gonna inspect my page. Inside head, we have our links, CSS files, and JavaScript chunks. And as you can see, the title of the page is Lama Dev, and the description is, this is the description. It's really awesome because you can change your title and description on the server side, and this is why Next.js is so strong when it comes to SEO. And also, when we fetch any data, we will be able to change this title according to our post because we are fetching our post on the server side. It's not possible with React. Let's see how we can change metadata. Let's open up, for example, contact page. Only thing I should do is come here and change the data. Let's say contact. This is contact page. Let's see. It's about page and it's the contact page. Perfect. But how we are going to change the title of single blog posts? Let's come here and search for generate metadata. As you can see, we can create static metadata or dynamic. Let's copy this and open up blog and ID. And I will paste it here. And using these params and the post ID, we are going to fetch our data. params.id. I will say const post. And it's going to be post title. And the description will be post description. Of course, it's going to be await. It's an async function. I will refresh. And as you can see, test one. Let's inspect. And our description is here. Awesome. It's that easy, guys. Just use metadata for static pages and use generate metadata for dynamic pages. So let's see how we can authenticate users. To do that, we are going to be using Next.auth library. And the newest version of that library is Auth.js. Let's open up Auth.js.dev. As you can see, this is the new version. And let's see how we are going to use it. I will choose setup. And we are going to be using Next.js version. Let's install this library. npm install or yarn add Next.auth. And after that, as you can see, we are going to need an endpoint, auth endpoint. Let's create. I'm going to close everything here. And inside API, I will say auth. And inside this folder, we are going to destructure Next.auth endpoint. That's because this library handles different kind of endpoints like API, auth, and sign in, and sign out, and for example, session, and what else? Let's actually check on documentation. As you can see, sign in, auth, sign out, session, providers, tokens. So we don't have to create all those endpoints. This library handles them using this folder. Of course, you can create your own endpoints also, like register, because I want to use different endpoint for creating users. And let's see how we are going to handle our Route.js. Let's create Route.js, and let's come here. I'm going to copy this and paste here. And as you can see, we can give here any authentication provider. It can be Google provider, GitHub provider, or if you want to, you can create your own custom provider. But before, let's try using GitHub or Google provider. I'm going to change here. Like that. And we are going to need client ID and client secret. To do that, we are going to be using Google Cloud Functions. Let's open up cloud.google.com. I'm going to open up console. Let's choose API and services. I'm going to choose credentials. As you can see, I've created in 2021. I will just delete it and create new one. Let's create credentials, client ID. Let's choose web application and let's give it a name. Let's say Lama Dev or test or whatever you want. And here I'm going to add my local host. And for the redirect URL, I'm going to be using API, auth endpoint, and callback, and Google. Let's create. As you can see, we have a client ID and secret. So I'm going to use them in my env file. Let's open up env. I will say client ID, Google client ID, and Google client secret. I will copy here. Okay, let's use them here. Google client ID and secret. And let's come back here. After creating our provider, we should create a secret key. That because this library takes this secret key and encrypt our tokens or other stuff. So you have to use it in your env file also. And you can create here any secret key, really doesn't matter. If you want to, you can create just random key using your terminal. But anyway, and after that, finally, we are gonna wrap our application with session provider. Let's open up layout here. After theme provider, let's import this first. I'm gonna wrap my container like that. If I do that, let's see. As you can see, there's an error that because session is using context API under the hood. And as I said, we cannot use context API in server components. We have to write here use client, but in that case, we will not be able to use this metadata. To prevent this problem, we can create a new component. Let's say auth provider.jsx. Let's create our function. And I'm gonna use this session provider here. Let's import. And I'm gonna take the children here and drop here. Right now we can use this provider instead of this session itself. Like that. I can delete here. Let's see. It's still the same because I forgot writing here use client. And perfect. But how we are going to use that session in our application? Let's open up the documentation. As you can see, there is a use session hook here. We are going to be using this hook, and after that we will be able to reach the status. It's going to be loading, authenticated or unauthenticated, and we will be able to reach this user data. Of course, we are going to be using this hook for only client-side components. Let's open up our dashboard. Actually, I'm going to delete this use effect, or maybe you will need that. I will say const session and use session hook. Let's import and let's see what's inside. Let's see, I'm going to open my console and there's an error here. Let's check. Okay, that's because we haven't created our URL in the env file. I said this script is necessary, but also we have to create here our URL, localhost URL. Of course, when you deploy your application, you should change here. This is why it's important. Let's check again. I will refresh the page. And there is one more mistake here, that because we are using app router, remember how we are doing. We are taking get or post methods and we are returning those methods. So what I'm going to do is writing here const handler, and I'm going to export this handler as get or post method. As get and post. I'm doing this that because when we pass our username and password, it's going to be a post method. And when we fetch our session, our user information is going to be a get method. In any case, we are going to send this handler. Let's see, I'm going to open up dashboard and my console. And as you can see, there's an object here. By the way, I forgot deleting this data. It's not important. This is our session. As you can see, we are not authenticated yet. In this case, we don't have any user data. So let's create a login page and try to log in with Google. If you remember, we already have here the login page. Let's open up, and in this container, I'm going to create a button and I will say login with Google. And again, it's going to be use client. When I click on this button, I'm going to call Next.auth sign-in function. I will say on click method, sign in. As you can see, it comes from Next.auth. And I'm going to pass here my provider name. And it's going to be, as you can see, Google. I will save and let's try. I will say dashboard and login. I will click. As you can see, it opens the Google page when I click. And let's get back to the dashboard. And right now we are authenticated. Let's actually delete this. data. Okay. At the beginning, as you can see, status is loading and after authenticated. And if we check the data, there's an expiration date of our token and the user information. It's that easy, guys. And there are tons of providers like GitHub, Google, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Just check this documentation and use whatever you want. But when it comes to using user credentials, it's going to be a little bit harder, that because we have to handle user email and password. But before that, let's try to create a new user. I will say register. And I'm going to create a form here, and using our API endpoint, we are going to create a new user. And after that, we are going to handle the login process using Next Auth. I'm going to close everything and I will open up register page. I will say use client, and inside this container I'm going to create a form. And let's create our first input. I will say placeholder and username. Let's give class name. Two more is going to be email and password. Let's change type. It's going to be email and password. Of course, they are going to be required like that. So we have to enter any username, email, and password. And after that, I'm going to create here a button. And let's say register. Let's give a class name, button. And after this form, I can create a link here. And I will say login with an existing account. Let's import from next link. And href is going to be login page, dashboard, and login. Let's see. Okay, they are here. Let's give quickly some style. I'm going to center everything. Align item center, justify content center. And for the form, I will say 300 pixels. And again, display flex, but it's going to be column. It's going to be vertical, and gap between each item will be 20 pixels. Of course, I forgot this link here. They are going to be horizontal like that. To prevent this, let's say flex direction column, and I can give gap like that. And for those inputs, let's give quickly padding. I'm going to delete background color. It's going to be transparent because we are using dark mode. And border will be 2 pixels, solid and gray. Border radius, font size, and font weight will be bold. Like that. And for this button, we have already created before. I will do exactly the same thing. This background color will be white, and it's going to be something like that. In the future, we are going to be using Next.js actions, but they are not stable yet. It's going to be stable maybe next year, maybe later. It's not production ready. So we are going to be using client-side methods. So I'm going to come here and say on submit method, and let's say handle submit. Let's create this function. I'm going to close here. I'll say const handle submit. Event prevent default. And we have 3 inputs here. If you want to, you can create here username, email, and password to use state hook. And when you change those inputs, you can set those states. But I prefer using form elements. What I mean by that, I will say const name. I will say event target, and the first target of this form and its value. Basically, this event represents this form, and the first target of this form is the first input. And if I say take the value of this first input, it's gonna give us the name which we write here. By the way, I didn't change its color. Okay. So I can do the same thing for others. It's gonna be email and password. And finally, I'm gonna send this to our endpoint. I will say async. Let's say try catch block. If there's an error, we can create here const error set error and use state hook. At the beginning, it's going to be false. If there's an error, it's going to be true. Oops, set. Okay. And if there's an error, we can show it here after this form, for example. If there's an error, right here, something went wrong. Or you can show the error message, whatever you want. And after that, I will say response await fetch method, and we are going to be using our API, auth, and register endpoint. Remember, I've created here endpoint. We are going to be using this. Let's create CRUD.js. And this method is going to be a post method because we are sending our information. I will write here headers. We are sending JSON. So content type is going to be application and JSON. And finally, we are going to be sending body, and inside this body, JSON.stringify name, email, and password. Okay, we are sending our information to register endpoint. It returns us a response. If this response.status equals to 101, which means successfully created, we are gonna redirect our user to login page. To do that, we are gonna be using useRouter hook. Let's come here and say const router useRouter. It comes from Next navigation. Be careful here. Don't use Next router because it was the previous version. And I'm gonna choose this. And push method, dashboard, and login page. And we can give here any query, let's say success. And we can write here our message, for example, account has been created. And in the login page, we can take this success message and show it to our user. Okay, let's open up our route. Let's create a post request. I will say export const post async function. We are going to be connected to DB, and we are going to take the user request. And inside this request, there is a body, and inside that body, we have user information. Let's say const name, email, and password. It's going to come from request and JSON. And after that, let's connect to the MongoDB. I will say await connect. Let's write here try catch method. And if there is something wrong, we are going to send this response. We are going to take the error message and send it to user with this status code. Okay. So how we are going to create a new user using those credentials? It's really easy. I will say const new user model. And we are gonna pass here our email, name, and password, but there is something important here. We are gonna enter a plain text, but we shouldn't store this in our database directly. We have to hash this password before. To do that, we are gonna be using bcrypt.js library. I'm gonna come here and say yarn add bcrypt.js. Okay. Let's import this here. Using this function, we are gonna encrypt our password. So I will say const hashed password await bcrypt and hash function. We are gonna pass here our password and we are gonna send here salt length. You can give any number here, doesn't matter. And in this new user, I'm gonna send my username, email, but the password will be hashed password. Okay, let's save this user in the MongoDB. I will say await new user and save method. And if everything is okay, we are gonna send a response and the status will be 201 and the message will be user has been created. Let's import this, don't forget that. Let's try, I hope everything is okay. test@gmail.com. I will register. And as you can see, we are in the success page. Of course, there's a Chrome warning because my password is from 1 to 6. Okay, perfect, it works. Let's check here. As you can see, there's a users collection. If I refresh, and our user is here. But what's this email? Oh, of course, it's gonna be first item, second, and third. Let's delete this. Let's get back. Okay, it's successful. And let's check again. Perfect. Okay, right now we know how to create new user. Let's see how we can sign in using Next.auth. Let's open up our endpoint here, Next.auth and route. And after this Google provider, I'm gonna add one more provider, and it's gonna be credentials provider. Let's import this. By the way, Next.auth is not recommending using password and email. They try to encourage you to use any social authentication or magic email link. But anyway, I know most of you want to sign in using email and password, and I will show you how to do that. In this provider, you can give any ID or any name. Let's give credentials. And after taking our user credentials, we have to authorize them. I will say async function authorize. And we are going to take the user credentials, email and password. And we are going to check if the user exists in our DB or not. To do that, we have to connect to MongoDB first. I will say await connect here. And after that, I will say try catch. If there is an error, we are going to throw this error. I'll say new error, and I'm going to pass in my error. And here, let's check if the user exists or not. I will say const user equal to user model and find one method because our user is unique. We can find it using its email. So I will say email equals credentials email. Basically, it comes from our user, from the client side. Here, we are going to create a form here. It's going to take the email and password, and it's going to compare the email in the database. If there is a user like that, we are going to compare its password. I will say, if there's a user, check password. If there's no user, we can throw another error, and let's say user not found. So I will say const is password correct. Remember, we are using bcrypt.js. Let's import. And I will say await bcrypt and compare method. And we are going to pass here credentials and password. And we are going to compare this with user password. This user in the DB. And again, another condition here. If password is correct, we are going to return this user. If it's not, another error, and this time it's going to be wrong credentials. Let's open up login page. If you remember, we are using Google provider ID here, and this time we are going to be using this ID, and after sending our email and password, it's going to connect to the DB and try to find the user. If there is no user, it's going to send this error. If password is not correct, it's going to send this error. And if everything is okay, it's going to return our user. Let's actually create exactly the same form here. I will copy here and paste. And the same CSS here. Let's copy them and paste here. But this time it's going to be login. And let's create this handle submit. I will copy here. And let's delete them actually. We are going to be using only this sign in function. But before, I need my email and password. Remember how we are doing this. Event target and the first item and its value. And I will do the same thing for password. And finally, we are going to be using credentials. And we are going to send our email and password. Let's see. Of course, we don't need this username. I'm going to delete that. We need only email and password. Let's try. test@gmail.com. My password. I will log in. And as you can see, it returns an error. Actually, I can send this error into a login page, so we don't have to leave the page. To do that, I'm going to open up Next authentication. And after providers, I'm going to say pages. And the error page will be dashboard and login. If there is an error, it's going to show it here. Let's try one more time. As you can see, error is here. Let's see what's wrong. I forgot writing await. It's fetching user, but it's not returning. Let's try one more time. And there is no error. Let's check. I will go to the dashboard, and as you can see, it's authenticated and we have the user. And if you have anything wrong, you can find the code in the GitHub repository. It's gonna be in the description. And this is how we are creating authentication using Next.js. So right now, let's see how we can protect our route. But before, I'm gonna add here sign out functionality. I will close everything and open up navbar. And instead of this console log, I will say sign out function from next auth. Let's see. I will open up my console and log out. And as you can see, loading and after unauthenticated. Perfect. So what I want to do is using use session hook here. And if it's not authenticated, we shouldn't see this button. I will say use session. I will import. And I will come here and write a condition. I will say if session and status equals authenticated, show this button. As you can see, it's not here anymore. Right now, we are in the dashboard, but we are not authenticated. It means we are not supposed to see this dashboard page. Let's open up dashboard and protect our route. Again, I'm gonna be using use router hook. From next navigation, and I'm gonna write here a condition. If status, session status, loading, return, p tag, and loading. Of course, you can give here any skeleton or progress bar, but it can stay like that. Another condition, I will say if it's unauthenticated, I'm gonna be using router and push method, and we are gonna be redirected to login page, dashboard, and login. And if it's authenticated, finally we will return our dashboard. Like that. By the way, we are using return statement here. It means we cannot use fetching method. It should be on top, like that. Okay, let's see. As you can see, we are here. I'm clicking, and we are not able to see dashboard. It's that easy. And if we are authenticated, by the way, I can do the same thing for login page. If it's authenticated, we shouldn't see this page. Let's do that actually. I will open up login page. I will say const session use session hook. I will just write my conditions. If session status is loading, it's gonna show the loading. If it's authenticated, we are gonna be redirected to dashboard. Let's import router also, like that. Let's see. As you can see, right now we are in the dashboard. If I try to visit login page, it redirects me to the dashboard. This is how we are protecting our routes. Let's log out. As you can see, login page. Let's log in and dashboard. Perfect. So let's create our dashboard page. On the left side, we are going to fetch our own posts, And on the right side, we are gonna create a form that we can add a new post. Let's close everything again and open up dashboard. As you remember, we are fetching these posts, but this time we are gonna fetch our own posts. I will say API posts, and I'm gonna pass here my username. I will say username equals, I'm gonna be using backtick, and session data user and its name. Let's see. I will say console log data. Okay, it works, but it's not what I expected because it returns all the data. I'm gonna open up my API posts here, and I'm gonna try to reach this username. To do that, we are gonna be using request URL. I'll say const URL, new URL, and I'm gonna pass here request.url, and using this URL, I'm able to reach to username. I'll say const username url.search params, and we are gonna get username. Basically, it's gonna take all the query and search for username, and the username is our session user and its name. So using this username, I can write here a condition. I'll say if there's a username, search for that username. If there is no, just fetch all the data. Let's see. As you can see, it's empty. But if I visit the public page, this post is still here. It means it doesn't belong to us. So let's create our own post. Let's come back. And firstly, I'm going to create a div. We are going to have post section and form section. I'll say styles and posts. And let's say new, and it's gonna be a form. And here we are gonna see our posts. Let's say one more div. It's gonna be image container. Inside, I'm gonna create an image. And alt. And after this image container, we are going to have a title. Let's say h2. It's going to be post title. Let's give class name. And finally, I'm going to create a button here like this, and we will be able to delete this post. Let's say class name, and it's going to be delete. Okay. Right now, I can map through this data and call this post. I'll say data map, and for each item, or let's say each post, call those items. Of course, we need a parent. Let's say post, like that. And I'm gonna give a key. It's gonna be post ID. Let's say post image. And post title. And for this new section, I will say add new post. I'm gonna add an input. It's gonna be title. Placeholder title, and let's say class name, input, another one, description, image URL, and finally content. But it's gonna be text area because it's gonna be a really long post. So let's say text area, and I will say placeholder content, and class name will be text area. And finally, let's create a button, and I will say send. And when we send this post, I will say on submit and handle submit. Async function, prevent default, because I don't want to refresh the page. And after that, I'm gonna take my items. Remember how we are doing this, like that. And I will write a try catch block. Console log this error, or you can create error use state. And I will say await fetch my API endpoint posts. And I'm gonna write here my configuration. Firstly, it's gonna be a post method. We are gonna send a body. Remember, we have to write here JSON stringify. And I'm gonna pass here title, description, image, content, and for username, session, data, user, and name. Okay, let's open up our route. And right now I'm gonna create one more route here, and it's gonna be a post method. Let's come here and take the body. I will say request and JSON. And remember how we are doing this. We are already done for the user. It's really easy. Const new post model, and I'm just gonna pass this body. And inside this try catch block, I will say await new post and save. And finally, I'm gonna pass here a message. Post has been created. 201 successfully created. And let's try. I will write if there is data. Also, we can use this is loading here. I will say if it's loading, right here, loading. If it's not, show this data. I didn't use styles here. Okay, as you can see, we don't have any data yet. And let's try. Of course, I'm gonna give some style, but for now, test from client. Let's write actually exactly the same thing. And I'm gonna paste here an image. Let's send. And when I refresh the page, it shows this error. That's because we didn't add any width and height for image. Let's say 200, height 100. And it's here. Okay, it works. Let's give a style and we can see better. I'm gonna open up my style here. Firstly, I'm gonna say display flags, and gap between them will be 100 pixels. And the posts container flags one. And we have one more container here, and it's the form. Sorry, new. Like that. And for the post, single post, I'll say display flags, align item center, and justify content space between. like that. When we add another item here, I want to give a space between them. So I will say margin 50 pixels from top and bottom, 0 from left and right. For image, I will say object width, cover, and for the image container, let's say 200, position relative, like that. And for this delete button, I will just say cursor pointer and the color will be red, like that. And what about here? I will say display flags, flags direction, column, and gap. And for input and text area, padding will be 10. I'm gonna delete the background color. It's gonna be transparent. Let's give a border, 2 pixels, solid and gray, BBB. And border radius, 3 pixels. Like that. When I write something here, I want to change its color. Again. And also, I'm gonna increase the font size and font weight. Okay. And for this button, I'm not gonna write it again. I will just paste it like this. Perfect. But there's a problem here. When we add any post, we have to refresh the page. Let's close here, by the way. I can take here mutate function, and when we add any data, we can revalidate our data. So I will come here. If it's successful, mutate. Let's try. I'm gonna paste this link everywhere. That's sent, and as you can see, it's immediately here. We don't have to refresh the page. And I can do the same thing when we delete our posts. Let's create that functionality, an API endpoint. Let's create this endpoint first. Of course, we are going to be using ID route. That's because we need the post ID. Let's duplicate this, and it's going to be a delete method. We are going to take this ID and find by ID and delete. And we are going to pass this ID. It's going to delete this post. And finally, we are going to send a message. Post has been deleted. Okay, let's use this endpoint. I'm going to come here and create onClick function. Handle delete. And of course, we are going to pass the post ID. So it should be an arrow function like that. And I will say post.id. Let's create this function. Handle delete, async, post ID, and I will say try catch. And I will say await fetch function. And the endpoint API posts, and I'm gonna pass this ID like that. And let's write our method. It's gonna be delete method. And if everything is okay, we are gonna mutate our data. Let's see. I will click and it's gone. Let's add back. Let's delete this. Perfect, it works. And if you want to reset your inputs after adding new post, you can come here and say event target and reset. I will add. As you can see, it's empty. Perfect. Okay guys, we have completed our application, homepage, portfolio. We are fetching all these data from local file. We are fetching data from our database, like that. Single post, about and contact page, dashboard. We can add or delete posts. We can log out, log in or register. By the way, I didn't give here a style, but don't worry. Just check the repository. It's in the description. We have dark mode, light mode. And I think it was a great project to learn Next.js. I hope you enjoyed. If you learned something new today, please like the video. Don't forget to follow Lama Dev's social media accounts. And if you want to support Lama Dev, you can use the link in the description below, or you can join the channel and let me know what kind of projects you like to see in the next tutorial. I hope I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.